It's my pleasure right now to be joined by a hard rock icon, a very popular personality, 45 years strong of banging his head. It's the great Dee Snider. We're not going to take it. Dee, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I didn't know where you were going with that 45 years strong of banging, but you're banging my head. Yes, I've been banging my head for that same amount of time. Yes, I have.
Dee, you're such a grounded guy. You're an intellectual guy. You speak well. You're not a drug guy. Never been a drug guy. Is that right? One woman your whole life, basically. I mean, how do you do it?
You know what? I'm not going to say I'm not flawed. I've certainly made some mistakes in my life, but there's a couple that I didn't make. And, I remember getting drunk at 14 years old, the first time I drank, and the only time. And to the point, I drank to the point where I was on the floor just vomiting. And that laying there as the little voice, that sober voice, you're going, God, if you ever let me walk again, you have that whole I swear off demon alcohol. But I also realized that I was incapable of controlling myself, that I didn't just have my first beer. I drank to the point of incapacitation. And I said, I think that I can't do that. And I can't do drugs. I never did drugs. So I said, if I do, I don't think I'll be able to stop myself. So I was wise enough to recognize that. Wise enough when I met my wife, Suzette, to realize that I had found this incredible young girl at the time and hang on for dear life. And she's an amazing woman. So I made some sound decisions that long-term have benefited me. And so, but I can't say that every decision I've ever made was a good one.
Well, I hear rock critics talk about who still has it, right? And you're knocking on 70 years old, but people say you've got the voice, the energy. I watched the live performances. Is that a big key that you've kept healthy, that you can still do it? Because a lot of people fall off a cliff.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I guess there's a decent list of sound decisions I made. Living a healthy lifestyle, very anti-rock and roll. I remember when we went to record our first album with Atlantic Records, and they told us the studio. Our first question, my question was, "Where's the nearest gym?" And the president of Atlantic Records in Europe, who is now my manager, Phil, we're still friends. He said, "This is with his English accent. My boy, it was the first time a rocker ever asked me where the nearest gym was." He said, "Where's the nearest pub? Where's the nearest strip club? Not where's the nearest health club." So I've always just and when I struck it rich, I bought a car, a house, and a gym. The first thing I bought was a gym. So I've had a very weird perception of what was important to me, but I benefited from it long term. So yeah, it certainly helps.
Speaking of long term, Dee, I'm here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, LSU Tiger Stadium down the street, 102,000 people. They play rock anthems, and We're Not Gonna Take It and I Wanna Rock. They play those two songs every game, and you got students that are 20 years old up there in the student section singing along. What's it like to create something like that that has stood the test of time?
It's surreal. Honestly, it's not something you ever expect. I mean, We're Not Gonna Take It, I'd have to say, has become almost a folk song where everybody in the world knows it. And I always joke that you could go into the jungles of Africa, and if you run into a tribe and said, "We're not gonna take it," they will sing back, "No, we ain't gonna take." So, but and many don't even know at this point who wrote the song, and it doesn't matter as long as they get the royalties. But that is surreal, quite honestly, and something you never expect.
I don't want to get tacky talking about money, but those two songs and the royalties you get off those two songs every year, could you live off that alone?
Yeah, certainly. They have become those songs. I've got some amazing stories. Some are. All right, I'll give you the I don't know what your audience is, so I'll give you the cleanest one I got. And even though I always use the right words, so they can use that anyway. But I got a call it was in the 2000s, and my manager said, "We've got an offer for he's the British manager. Dee, you've got an offer to SpongeBob SquarePants wants to use I Want to Rock in their movie SpongeBob." And I'm like, Oh, cool. That's great. He says, one caveat, my boy. I want to change the words to Goofy Goober Rock. And I said, what? Goofy Goober? Are you kidding me? This is my legacy. This is my art. How much? And when I heard the number, and I had 2 kids in college, I said, okay, do they want me to sing it for them? Because, as I say, I'm a whore, but I'm an expensive whore. Yeah, I've been very blessed that these couple of songs. And again, my manager says, if you're only going to have 2, and he handled Zeppelin and the great band, you've only got 2 hits, my boy, make them doozies. So they've been doozies.
Well, you certainly have a lot of other songs on YouTube that have over 4 million views and so forth. So you certainly have your collection of stuff. These days, parents yell at their kids for staring at their phones all day. Back when we were growing up, it was get away from MTV and stop watching MTV for 4 or 5 hours, right? How did you handle? Did you literally? I mean, it's the chicken or the egg. You got to have the good song to have the good video. But did you literally go from an unknown to everybody knowing who you were because of these videos?
Yeah, certainly it took it to, again, that the unexpected. I always thought the band would make it, but I didn't know we would have hit records. I didn't think that. And I didn't I expected to go from town to town. I didn't expect to be shot out of a cannon, which is what MTV did, and have your face plastered all over the place, this face of all faces, and have people, everybody, not just the rock fans recognizing you, but the parents and the grandparents recognizing you. So it was really unexpected. That was a turn, and it's we were kind of there when MTV erupted. So we were a part of that, and nobody really saw that coming, except maybe Mike Nesmith from the Monkees. Apparently, he's like he was at the forefront of rock videos before anybody else. Yeah, he apparently saw the writing on the wall.
Dee Snider, were you trying to scare people? I mean, we had Alice Cooper, we had Kiss, we had some of that stuff before, but your look was very, whoa, who is this guy?
Yeah, certainly, the truth is I started out trying to be pretty. I was inspired by bands like the New York Dolls and David Bowie and Alice Cooper for sure. But we were wearing women's clothing, and I for some reason thought that I was pretty. And so along the way, it was really the audience when they would bring in, and we had a very big following before we even had a record out regionally, and the fans would bring pictures that they loved, and it was always pictures of me like making these crazy faces. And then my wife was, she always did the hair, the makeup, the costumes. She, helped us. She doesn't like to take credit for my makeup, because she would say, "Why don't you try some eyeshadow?" And I'm like, "Okay." And, she goes, "Well, that isn't what I had in mind." Why don't you put some, everything I did was always, she said, "You're not putting on makeup, you're putting on war paint." So I realized at some point, I said, they don't want to see me doing this. They want to see me doing this. So that just I said, accept this is the face you were given. Give the audience what they want.
Awesome. I don't mean to go down the Dee Snider checklist of things I should talk to you about, but certainly 1985, Parents Music Resource Center, Washington Wives, Tipper Gore, Susan Baker, they identified We're Not Going to Take It for Violence. If this was a sporting event, Dee Snider, I feel like you guys were like a 40-point underdog, right? I mean, the way you looked and walked into the building, certainly this guy is not going to be able to handle these people intellectually. And I want to talk to you about John Denver too, but just going up there, and that's been a big part of your legacy.
Yeah, that was a blessing and a curse. Ultimately, a blessing, though. Initially I became persona non grata, became the poster boy for everything wrong with rock and roll. And after that, that performance, if you want to call it a performance, it was my phones were tapped, my mail was checked, my packages were being checked by the government. They did not like the idea that this dirtbag came in and made them look silly, which is what I did. But at the time, when they asked me if I would come and testify, I thought I was carrying the flag into battle. I did not. And when I got there, I realized, really did not have any support from the community. And I was sort of standing there by myself with a flag. But it was the right thing. Do the right thing is the saying. And I would do it again today in a heartbeat. I have no regrets for doing the right thing. You should never have, even if it's not the popular thing, you should never have regrets about doing the right thing.
John Denver, rest his soul. I'm a big fan of his music. I thought he wrote obviously some classic songs. They saw his short hair and his rated G music and thought this guy's going to fall in line with us. But he stood up for you, the rocker.
Yeah, I remember being in the back. I would say in the green room, in the dressing room. But it was an office with Frank Zappa, and we were talking, and we were just concerned. We didn't know where John was going to stand because, not only had he become as American as Mom and Apple Pie with his holiday specials and his hit movies, he was coming from NASA to testify here, where he was being interviewed to be the first musician in space at that time. So he couldn't have been more, and not that, and I consider myself to be a proud American, but it's saying, the way people looked at us, me and Frank, and John came in and stood tall, and he had not forgotten that Rocky Mountain High was banned on certain radio stations because they thought he was talking about drugs.
Who could hear that song and think that?
No, it was clear as a bell what he was talking about, and oh God, was banned as being sacrilegious. And the words weren't allowed on certain marquees in certain Bible Belt areas. So he remembered and he understood what censorship was about, and he stood tall. And one of my great regrets is that I never got to shake his hand. I didn't get to meet him, but you can never speak ill of John Denver in my presence. And as it turns out, he was way more rock and roll than me or Frank. Me and Frank were both no drugs, no alcohol, married, kids. Apparently, John was a bit of a wild man. He had a drinking problem, took a chainsaw to his home furniture in a fight with his wife, his ex-wife at some point. So, he presented himself as being this clean-cut guy, but he was he acted like I looked.
You fill up my sense.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, song, what a voice. What a voice.
So we just hit the 30-year anniversary of Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana, which a lot of your fans would say, I don't like that stuff. That killed my bands or my favorite bands. What was the downfall of metal and reflecting on Nirvana all these years later? Overrated or great?
Oh, I don't think they were overrated at all. But they, like so many people, they were just making music. They weren't creating a new art form. They weren't trying to create those first bands, those Soundgardens, Pearl Jams, and Nirvanas, and Alice in Chains. They hated the word grunge. It was just another label stuck on bands. They were just rock and roll band. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't, and I really liked what they were doing. It was very exciting and fresh sounding. And really the downfall of 80s metal was the fault of 80s metal. It became too commercialized. It got into an unplugged mode where everybody was using folk guitars and singing, and they're like, well, what's rock and roll about that? And it just became overdone, overexposed, over everything. And these bands from Seattle came in. And by the way, if you look do a little research, you find out that they were all in hair bands originally. They were all 80s rockers. I mean, and I said this recently and people were stunned. But I was only quoting from Kurt Cobain's diary. He says, I don't know what everybody's talking about. Smells Like Teen Spirit, like this revelation. He goes, it's More Than a Feeling by Boston.
Yeah.
And there's even a video, and people said, how can you say that? I said, he said that. He said it. He did the video. He says in his diary, the video was a Twisted Sister video. He said, he said it's a Twisted Sister video. He didn't get and there is a film of them in concert at Reading Festival, and they start playing More Than a Feeling on stage, singing More Than a Feeling, and then they go into Smells Like Teen Spirit. So they said, that's corporate rock, and this is the new alternative. He goes, we're just a rock band, So it wasn't overrated. It was just a perfect storm. People were tired of the decade of decadence and looking for something fresh and new. And along come these bands that were so stripped down. The flannel shirts were just a way of life in Seattle. You need one to survive, but it looked like a fashion statement, and it was a perfect storm.
Dee, I remember seeing an interview with you. You said after Stay Hungry, you're sitting in a huge mansion, you've got sports cars, a swimming pool, and you're trying to think of your next angry teenage anthem, and you just couldn't come up with it, and you had the cover of the Leader of the Pack. But your recent solo music has got so much anger and edge, and it's just so raw. For the love of metal, American made, become the storm. I love the lyric, tomorrow's no concern. I gave you yesterday, tomorrow's no concern. I don't need it because today is mine. Tell me about your latest solo effort and just going out there and thrashing.
Well, I found out that, first I did have that moment sitting by the pool where, in my Speedo, I think it was the 80s, people. And I'm just like going, yeah, I got nothing, I mean, I'm like happy. So that just completely diffused me. But I realized, it was several years ago, but it was certainly much later in my life, that, I may be happy, well-adjusted and living happily ever after, which I am. But I have become a voice for the voiceless and have to speak for those who can't speak for themselves. Just because I've made it through doesn't mean there aren't others who need some help and to be lifted up. And I always felt that I, in my songs, even though they were a lot of times rebellious and in your face, but I always try to put hope in there as well. We're not going to take it. Wasn't just tearing down. It was, we got this. We can do this. We believe in yourself. We don't need them to tell us how to do it. And so I continue that. And that's part of this inspiration for Leave a Scar was the state of the world today. I feel that the vast majority of people's voices are not being heard. I am a true believer that the majority of people are moderates, leaning left, leaning right. Vice magazine called me a gun-toting feminist. I am a concealed carrier and I am a feminist. So like, what? And there are people who go, how does that work? Well, there's the loudest voices in the room are on the extreme left and extreme right. And because they're the loudest, I call them bullying minorities. People think that they are the voices for the masses, and they're not. The people in the middle just trying to make sense of it. We tend to sit back too quietly and too often say these phrases, I'm sure it'll work out. Things usually turn out for the best. The pendulum tends to swing back to the middle. And that time for those statements is kind of gone. We are, the majority need to speak up. And I feel like I try to be a voice for those people. And you know what? I don't disrespect the extremes on the left and the right. At least they're speaking out for what they believe in. At least they're making their voices heard. But the majority tend to not. And I realize that I can be a voice for those people who, again, the voice for the voiceless.
Yeah, that So What song and video, very, very powerful that you did.
Yeah, that was a very intent to be. So I can tap into those feelings. Like I said, even though I've got two houses on the water, and I'm happily married, and I got I'm financially set, and all those things, I could still tap into when I wasn't, and there, and speak that in that voice very believably. The scars are still there. They're just buried.
All right, a couple more things with the great Dee Snider. This is kind of a self-serving question for me, just because I was such a huge fan. We're about to hit the 1-year anniversary of Eddie Van Halen passing away. A guitar god, certainly one of my favorites of all time. Did you have any interaction with him? What were your memories of Van Halen over the years?
I have got the most bizarre and amazing story to tell about that. I never really knew him. I never really interacted with him, but I went to the NAMM convention, which is a National Association of Music Sellers or whatever. And it's where, and I went with Leslie West of Mountain, who is a deity. He passed last year, and he's a deity in that community and idolized by so many. And walking into a place like that with Leslie West, it was incredible to see everybody just sort of, many were speechless, many literally bowed. They were just in awe of him. So he was a thing called the NAMM Jam. And I was hanging out with Leslie, and Leslie was sound checking. And he was on stage, and I just got a folding chair, and I set it up on this middle of the stage. Me and Leslie were friends. And I'm just sitting there, and Leslie's sound checking. And all of a sudden, Eddie Van Halen, in the middle of a song that Leslie was playing, Eddie Van Halen walked out with a guitar, and plugged into one of the amps and then stood on the other side of my chair. And the two of them faced off. Now, I'm just like I'm sitting here. So this is Leslie West's guitar. This is Eddie Van Halen's guitar. And they start jamming with me sitting in the middle. Like, what are you doing? I said, first of all, I was like, you know, like, do you jump up and start like rocking, or do you sit but seem like you're, you know, like how far do you go? So I'm trying to be cool, but I'm sorry to be into it. And, you know, and just speak about how what Eddie felt about Leslie. Eddie did not play Eddie Van Halen. He emulated Leslie West's guitar playing. As Leslie was a big influence on him. But that was my only to see up close and personal two giants this far away from my head playing guitar. And then, you know, and then Eddie walked off, and that was the end of it. And I was like, did that happen? Did that really happen? You know, it's like the time we were in the studio, we were recording our first demo, and we were in Electric Ladyland, and the Rolling Stones were in another, we weren't famous, another studio down the hall recording Some Girls. And we were in the middle of listening back to a mix, and Mick Jagger burst into the room and does the chicken dance like through the studio, around the console. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching, and then around, and then back out the door. And I was like, and when the music stopped, I said, did Mick Jagger just come in? Like, that didn't really just happen. And, you know, so, but I don't know, maybe I dreamt it. I don't know, but amazing moment.
Yeah. And Sammy Hagar, another guy, both in 1984, both of you guys had the blonde hair. You were both screaming. Did you ever get mistaken for him at any point?
Oh, my God. Yes, it's so funny. I remember one time somebody coming up to me and in my heyday and said, no, I wasn't mistaken. It was Sammy said, cut your hair. And I started saying, why is Sammy saying cut my, I never met Sammy. I was a fan. I was like, why is he saying cut my hair? And I was so confused until in the 90s when he was in Van Halen, and now he had become, and Twisted Sister had fallen, people would come to me and go, hey, are you Sammy Hagar? I go, and that's why he said cut my hair. And that's why he said cut. And one day, many years later, we had pancakes together at breakfast, and we talked about how our eras of being mistaken for each other.
Dee, I really appreciate your time, man. You are a legend. I loved you in Cobra Kai, by the way. I had that down here as well. Loved that show. Loved your appearance that you made in that also.
Let me tell you, that was a godsend. And I could talk about that for a minute, because it was I do these convention appearances, and a lot of TV and film stars are there, and Billy Zabka was at one, and we just sort of hit it off as friends, and he was there signing pictures of the Karate Kid, and so we exchanged phone numbers and we became friends, and then Ralph Macchio ran into him, and a Long Island boy like myself, and so then he told me one time, he says, YouTube is doing a Cobra Kai show. I'm like, oh, that's great, Billy. I'm like, YouTube? What's that? What's that? So, and then he called me one day. He said, hey, man, Netflix is picking up the series, and we're filming a new season, and they're going to release the whole thing. I was like, oh, that's awesome. You're always happy if you're friends. He goes, what do you think about being in one of the episodes? Now, mind you, it has not hit Netflix yet. So it's still that YouTube whatever. So I'm like, yeah, man, awesome. So I go down to Atlanta. We filmed the show. I knew nothing. I never watched an episode. I knew nothing about the show. I do now. And I didn't even know I saw this kid in a wheelchair, and Billy's there, and I want to rock. And oh, cool. That was fun. I hung out with Ralph and Billy, and I go home. Cut to middle of COVID. They released the first two seasons, and it explodes. Binge watching, everybody's getting turned on to Cobra Kai. And then season 3 comes out, and 75 million people saw the episode. And these kids are all who the hell this old dude is walking down the street now knows, hey, that's Dee Snider, the most badass rocker of all time. And and all of a sudden that'll be on my gravestone. Okay, I'm putting on my gravestone. Here lies Dee Snider, the most badass rocker of all time, Cobra Kai. And it's because now it's like all these young people are suddenly aware of me again. So it was amazing. Just friends doing something together, and just turned into this amazing gift for me, for my career. So it was great.
Well, as I leave you, there's a very popular band here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana called the Molly Ringwalds. Each member of the band dresses up as a character each night, and there's one guy every show they do who dresses up as Dee Snider. Every night he gets on stage with the blonde hair and the makeup, and everybody knows who he is.
Tell him I said, thank you for carrying the torch. Those days are behind me now.
No makeup, right?
No makeup, except in the privacy of my own home. Great talking to you, man. Take care, man.
You too. Thank you. The great Dee Snider.
Okay, thank you.